Welcome to this short video which is designed to talk you through the DEA Portfolio Guidance. So the likelihood is you've just completed one of our courses, whether it be online or in the classroom, and your tutor will have gone through with you on the last day of the course the Portfolio Guidance. It may be the case it's been some time since you attended the course, or perhaps you've just forgotten some of the notes, so here's a chance to refresh and remind you on exactly what's required, and this should help you through the portfolio journey. So first of all, we're going to discuss the assessment process. So Energy Trust, who are a Sitting Guilds approved centre, Sitting Guilds, they regulate us and provide you with a quality assurance of your certificate. So there is a strict assessment process that we must go through. The process begins with you, the candidate. So your role is to produce the portfolio and submit it to be assessed. So this portfolio will consist of generally evidence, so this could include documents, photographs, EPCs, screenshots of websites, research, written documents. This all forms part of your portfolio. Now the portfolio will be submitted and looked at by somebody called your assessor. So your assessor will have been assigned to you during the training, and you should know who that is. And the assessor's job is to review your submissions, to provide feedback, and give you opportunity to make amendments or any changes. The most important part of the assessor's role is to make sure that you are meeting the required standards set out by Sitting Guilds. Now, the way this portfolio will be submitted is using an online e-portfolio system. Now, the system that we'll be providing for you, further information will follow later on in the process. Once the assessor has signed off on your portfolio and is happy with everything and you've met the required standards, the portfolio then passes to another individual. This person is known as the Internal Quality Assurer, or IQA. So the IQA, again, has been assigned to you. You should know who this person is during the training. The IQA's role is to make sure that the assessor is carrying out his assessments thoroughly and that the candidate is meeting the required standards. So this is a quality assurance process. Once the IQA has signed off on your portfolio, the final person in the chain is the External Quality Assurer, or the EQA. So the role of the EQA is to have the final sign-off, the final check, and it provides that quality assurance process to ensure that you have been trained to a competent standard. So this is the assessment process that we are required to inform you of as part of your Sitting Guilds qualification. Now, prior to attending the course, you should have received an email containing the DEA Distance Learning Pack. It looks a little bit like the one we have on the screen here. Now, this email contains two very important pieces of information. First of all, it contains a zip file. So this is a downloadable zip file, which you will need to unzip on a computer, either a Mac or a Windows machine. This will not work on an iPad or a phone. And once unzipped, the zip file you'll find contains a number of folders and documents which form part of your resources to help you complete the course. The other important piece of information that you'll find in this email is your Assessor Hub login details. So you should have been sent a link with a login, username and password, and this is what will give you access to the Trainee Assessor Hub, where you can actually produce your draft EPCs for the portfolio. So let's take a closer look at the contents of this distance learning pack. So once you've unzipped the file onto your computer, you'll see a number of folders and various PDF documents. We're going to take a look at each one of these in turn. So first of all, we have the ECMK application pack. So during the training, it should have been explained to you that once you are qualified as a DEA, you are then required to join an accreditation scheme. Now, there are several schemes to choose from. We have recommended ECMK because they are the ones that have provided the Assessor Hub software that you've been learning to use. So it makes sense, and we would recommend joining ECMK for your accreditation. Now, as part of that process, once you're qualified, you will need to fill in an application form and sign several documents. So what we've done is we've included these in this application pack, just in case you wanted to get a bit of a head start on that process. But let me remind you that this should not be completed until after you are qualified. So this will come a bit later on. You will also find within the distance learning pack some important reference documents. And as you can see there's quite a large library of information, various documents that will help you when you're researching and perhaps trying to answer some of the relevant questions. The documents here, we don't expect you to read them all from cover to cover within a matter of days, but you will be conversant with them over the weeks, months and years to come. So hopefully you'll find that library there very useful, and it's all in one place. Another important document you'll find in the pack is the floor plan grid paper. So the idea is you can print off this blank grid paper. It has a checklist reminding you of all the information that needs to be on the floor plan, and what you can do is you can sketch out your floor plan using pen, highlighters, etc., and then you can either scan or photograph this document back into your portfolio. Some of you may have alternative methods of producing your floor plans. Perhaps you prefer your own style of grid paper. Perhaps you have an app that produces floor plans digitally. These are all acceptable methods, but one way or another, you need to include a floor plan for each of your EPCs as part of your portfolio and ongoing in the real world. So there's a blank, fresh copy there for you to print off. To accompany the floor plan, you should also have some site notes. So these are generally handwritten site notes that you'll be completing during your survey. So this blank copy here is made up of 3 pages, and the idea is you can print this off, put it onto a clipboard, and as you walk around the building and navigate the building, you can make notes, and it also serves as a crib sheet, as a reminder to make sure you don't miss anything. Now again, it's required as part of the portfolio, but in the real world, you may create your own forms. Perhaps you're using an app on a tablet, so you may not necessarily have to fill these in a real world scenario, but you are required to do it as part of the portfolio. Another very important document that you should always make reference to is the RDSAP manual. So this document is really the A to Z of your role as a DEA. Many of the answers to your questions can be found in this document. So we again suggest you keep this to hand. Some of our students print this off and have it bound, but it does contain all the information that you need to be able to produce EPCs. There's a small caveat here. There have been a number of updates since this document was produced, and these are known as conventions. You will find the latest conventions documents in the Distance Learning Pack important reference folder. So please read this document in conjunction with the EPC conventions to make sure you're working to the very latest up-to-date standards. And it's also worth noting, during the COVID-19 pandemic, the government have published guidance on those that are working in other people's homes, which of course applies to many tradespeople, but it also applies to us as DEAs. So if you're planning to enter somebody's home, please make sure you've read this document. There is a link there to the government website to make sure you're getting the very latest advice. And of course, this can change quite frequently as things evolve with the pandemic. So please make sure you are following the latest guidance within that document. Okay, so let's take a deeper look at the portfolio itself. So within the Distance Learning Pack, you'll see a folder called Portfolio. And within that folder, you can see we've broken it down into an organised structure. Now, it's very important that you keep your portfolios organised, because if your documents are not labelled correctly, if the folders are not organised very well, it creates much more work for the assessor, and ultimately that means it's going to take a lot longer for you to get qualified. So it's very important that you label things clearly, make sure your folders are organised, and if you follow the structure that we've laid out there on the screen, you can't really go wrong. So for each of your 5 EPCs, you'll see clearly there is a blank folder there waiting for your work to be populated. You'll also notice the General Documents folder, which contains some academic tasks that you also need to complete as part of the portfolio. And finally, you'll see a PDF document there, which is a portfolio guide and checklist. And this is quite an important one. So let's take a look at this checklist. This checklist contains really a crib sheet, so you can tick off each task, each item of evidence that is required for your portfolio. And this document contains some further guidance within when you have a look. So I strongly suggest that perhaps you print this one off or have it on your desktops quickly there so you can refer back to it. This really will form the contents page of your portfolio. Now notice the first section there is these general documents, which are split into 4 units. So we're going to take a deeper look at each of those units in just a moment. But let me just read out the clear instructions that you'll find in the header of this document. Now this is very important, so please pay close attention. It states, it will be useful to use this document and to tick off each piece of evidence as you complete it. Please ensure all of the general documents and at least EPC 1 are complete before submitting them to be marked. Once you are ready to begin your portfolio submissions, please contact helpline@energy-trust.co.uk to request your ePortfolio login details. You'll receive your online ePortfolio access via email with instructions on how to upload your portfolio evidence. So those instructions there are quite clear. You are to focus on completing the general documents and at least your first EPC. And at that point, when you are ready, email our helpline, and in response, you will be given further instructions and a login to your online ePortfolio. So let's take a look at each of these general document unit folders one at a time. So let's focus on the first unit there, which is Unit 331. So Unit 331 contains a number of tasks to complete, and what you'll find in the distance learning pack is we've provided you with a number of templates to help you achieve each of these assignments. So for example, one of the documents there is a CV. So you are required to provide a copy of your CV. Now this can be an existing CV that you've already produced, could be a PDF or a Word document, so you can just drop that into the folder. It may be the case that you don't have a CV, or it's been many years since you updated yours. So we have included there a CV example, a template that you can use. So these are all Microsoft Word documents. So you would need to open these up on your computer, edit them, amend them, and save them back with those titles. So the CV should be pretty straightforward for most of us. Another item on that list is a letter to request confidential information. So throughout the portfolio, you'll see several of these letters. Now these are hypothetical communications which are designed to show that you can communicate professionally with a customer. Now these are referred to as business skills. Now I appreciate some of you will be running your own businesses, so this is something you will be doing sort of part of the course. For others, perhaps the company you work for handles all the admin and all the communications. But regardless, you are still required to demonstrate you have these skills. So all you need to do with the letter template that you'll find is make it your own. So reword it, put your own letter heading on there, change it to make it your letter. And again, this is all purely hypothetical. It's a pretend letter communicating with the client, explaining why they've requested confidential information, and under things like data protection and GDPR, it's not possible to disclose certain things. So have a look at the template and then populate it with your own words. Another similar example of this is the complaints procedure. So for any business owner, whether you're self-employed working from home or whether you're a large corporation, you are required to have a complaints procedure. And this just lays out a way that a customer can progress if they have an issue or a complaint, and a formal method of dealing with that. So you may already have your own complaints procedure, perhaps on your website or documented. That's great. Just drop that in your folder. If you do not have a complaints procedure, then we've provided an example that you can adapt for your own use. You'll also notice there's something called the witness statement. Now, the witness statement is a signed document, and again, we've provided a template. And what we need you to do is get this signed by a witness who can vouch for you to say that they've observed you undertake an EPC in a professional manner. So in normal circumstances, this might be your employer, it could be a colleague that you work with, it may even be a client that you've done some work for. In the current COVID situation, it may be that we're housebound during lockdown, for example, then we can extend that to perhaps members of your household, but another human being who can vouch for you to say they've observed you undertake an EPC in a professional manner. So look at the template there, get it signed, make sure your name's on it, and make sure it shows the appropriate property address as well. You'll also notice towards the end of that list, this is probably the more challenging task, something called Assignment 331, Task A. So Task A is a document which requires you to answer a number of questions. When you open this one up, you'll see some blank boxes that need to be filled in. Not all of them are blank, but you only need to fill in the blank ones. To help you identify where some of the information is to help you answer these questions, we've provided you with an accompanying Task A guidance notes. So if you look at the guidance notes and look at the Task A questionnaire document, it should help you point in the right direction in terms of the information that you need to research. It's also worth noting on this list, which there isn't a template for, something called a copy of a diary page or similar. So what we also needed to supply as part of Unit 331 is a copy of an imaginary diary page or a calendar. Now this can be digital or it might be a physical diary, but what we want you to do is show an example of an imaginary week in the future. Perhaps put some imaginary appointments in there, Monday morning, 10 a.m, EPC survey, and take a screenshot or a photograph of that hypothetical week and include that in your portfolio. This is just to demonstrate that you can manage your time effectively. So that's Unit 331, a bit of paperwork, but follow the guidance and the templates we've provided, and that will complete that unit. Let's move on to the next unit, which is Unit 332. Now there's just two assignments here to complete, Task A and Task B. Now Task A is an electronic Word question paper. Again, you'll find on the distance learning pack that there is some guidance notes to accompany this questionnaire, and this is for you to complete in your own time as a Word document and upload as part of your portfolio. The other item on the list, Task B, this is another letter accepting an instruction. So again, this is a hypothetical communication explaining to a client, accepting an instruction, confirming the date, the time, and all your terms and conditions, etc. Again, check the template within the folder and perhaps make your own version of that based upon your own personal understanding and style. So that's Unit 332. Moving on to Unit 333, there are a number of tasks here. You'll notice a couple of these have been crossed off. So for example, Task A, question paper, this is an electronic question paper that you are yet to complete. You'll find a Word document for this along with some accompanying guidance notes in the pack. Task B, which you'll notice it has a line through it, as well as Task D, these are the two online tests that you would have completed during the training course. So presumably you've passed these and they can be signed off and they will be added to your portfolio in due course. So you can cross those two off and ignore those for now. Then we come on to Task C1, which is a completed property matrix. Now this is a bit of a tricky document to understand, so we're going to come back to that in just a few moments. Task C2 is an equipment list. Again, look at the template. This is a very simple one-page document which provides a list of all the equipment and tools that you may need to complete your job. So there's not really much you need to do to that one, but it's there for you to submit as part of your portfolio. And you'll also notice there Task C3. This is another electronic question paper for you to answer in your own time. It's a Word document with just 2 questions, and again it comes with accompanying guidance notes. So let's just take a look at the completed property matrix, because although we've given you templates and guidance for all of these tasks, the property matrix requires a little bit more explanation. So let's have a look at the property matrix. So the principle of this is there are 5 EPCs to complete as part of your portfolio. The first EPC you will complete as a virtual exercise, which most of you have already completed as part of your training course. So that first property, 6 Dale End Close, number 1, you can see there it fits into the age bracket of 1966 to 1982. It also satisfies the criteria of a semi-detached house. And you'll notice there is a number 1 in the column for extension because the building has an extension. Now the second project, Flat 4 Bytham Hall, this is one that you may or may not have already completed. This is another virtual survey that we've provided for you in the distance learning pack. Now EPC2, you'll notice it populates various boxes on the matrix. So this particular flat, it was a pre-1929 flat. It has an extension and it has a room in the roof. So again, can you see there how the 3 boxes with the number 2 in, they show and demonstrate the criteria that's been covered. Now the third building, the third address that you see there, you're prompted in red to provide your own address. So presumably during the COVID-19 pandemic, you'll be assessing your own home as your third property. So this particular address needs to be your own address, and then a number 3 needs to be placed on the grid in the appropriate boxes. Now this will be different for each of you. So for example, you might live in a detached house that was built in the 1930s, so you'd put a 3 in that box, and it might have a conservatory, so you'd put a 3 in that box as well. It may also have an open fire. So remember, the property matrix is a way of demonstrating all the different criteria that you've covered across your 5 EPCs. So just to confirm, EPCs 1 and 2, these are virtual surveys that you will complete as part of the course or provided in your distance learning pack. EPC 3, this needs to be one of your own buildings. It can be any building, but probably your own home is a good example. When it comes to your 4th and 5th EPC projects, we would prefer if you could acquire your own buildings because this will give you a greater learning experience. So if you can, and if it's safe to do so, operating of course within the latest COVID guidance, try and access your own buildings for your 4th and possibly 5th projects. But if this is not possible, perhaps you're locked down or you're sheltering in place and that you can't even leave the building, well, we've provided as backup some virtual surveys which you'll find in the distance learning pack. So only use those 4th and 5th virtual surveys if you really need to. And of course, precedence is taken with the current COVID-19 restrictions, and please make sure you're following the latest government guidance. So hopefully that explains a little bit more clearly how the 5 EPCs should be structured and making sure that the property matrix has been satisfied. Now, one final point on this screen, you'll notice under the column for conservatory, there is an asterisk. So that's just to demonstrate if, for example, you cannot find one of the criterias, in this case a conservatory, then instead of actually providing evidence of that, you can provide an explanation in the form of a written statement. So if you can provide perhaps a Word document with a written statement explaining how you would assess a conservatory and the implications that has on your EPC, that can be used to satisfy that criteria in the event you can't actually find a conservatory, for example. If there are any queries on this, please get in touch with our helpline and we'll be happy to offer further advice. Moving on to the final unit then of the general documents is Unit 334. There are 3 items here to complete. Task A, this is a question paper which you may or may not have completed depending on which version of the course you've done. So if you've done the 3-day course with us online or in the classroom, then you will have already completed Task A as an online question paper. That can be crossed off. If you've only done the 2-day weekend course with us, then that's a question paper, an electronic paper that you still need to complete, and you'll find it in your distance learning pack. Task B2 is another question paper that needs to be completed, again with appropriate guidance supplied. And Task C is a final letter, a hypothetical letter, and everything is templated with appropriate additional guidance where required. So all of these templates you'll find in the distance learning pack. So that's the general documents, that's the academic portion of the portfolio. Now we move on to discussing the EPCs themselves. So let's talk about the first EPC project, which at this stage you've partially completed. So EPC 1 and its supporting documents. So during the training, and also contained within your distance learning pack, you will find these 4 PDFs. So these are floor plans, photographs and site notes, along with a virtual tour that we've supplied to you as a virtual exercise for your first EPC project. Now, what you need to do is you need to recreate this project with your own written site notes. So you're going to have to recreate those. You need to supply photographs. Well, of course, you're not visiting this building, so just supply the photographs that have already been given to you. The floor plans, you will need to recreate these again. These need to be produced on your blank grid paper in your own style, and these floor plans need to be produced by you. And then the last 2 documents there are actually taken from the software. So the Assessor Hub Site Note Report and the Draft EPC Summary. So let's just take a closer look at each of these documents to make sure we clearly understand what needs to be produced. So first of all, the written site notes. So you will find a blank copy of this pro forma in your distance learning pack. And what you need to do is print one of these off, fill it in with your own handwriting, make sure you understand it and you filled it in correctly. And then you either need to scan or photograph this and upload it as part of your portfolio. The photographs, well, for this first project, we've already given you the photographs, so you'll need to resupply these and just include the PDF that you already have. When it comes to the floor plan, again, although we've given you one for reference, you still need to create your own version of this floor plan in your own style to demonstrate you understand how to produce a floor plan with the accurate information. So again, print off the blank grid paper or digitally produce a floor plan, whatever format you prefer, and supply that in your portfolio. Now, within the Assessor Hub trainee software, you should have been shown during the training how to produce your Assessor Hub Site Note Report document, which is this blue coloured document which contains a summary of all of your software data input. So to get this document, you need to log into your Assessor Hub, go to your assessment, and you'll see at the bottom of the screen a download button where you can actually download this PDF. Please include this within your project. And the final thing you're going to need is the EPC summary. Now, due to some changes in 2020 regarding the EPC register, software providers can no longer generate draft EPCs. So in place of that, we are now requiring you to produce a screenshot of the summary screen showing your EPC results. So a screenshot similar to what we have there will be perfectly acceptable, and it's just to check that you've calculated the correct results. So make sure you've included all of these items for your first EPC, and these will be submitted and packaged up as part of your portfolio submission. So that's EPC 1. EPC 2 will be very much the same. So EPC 2, which is based on a flat 4 by them hall. So again, we've given you the photographs, we've given you the floor plans, we've given you the site notes, and you've got a copy of a virtual tour. Using that raw data, you need to produce and reproduce all of the relevant evidence. So exactly as before, we need to see the written site notes, we need to see the photographs that we've provided, you need to produce your own floor plan, you need to download the Assessor Hub Site Note Report from the software, and you need to take a screenshot of the draft EPC summary and include all of those documents within your second EPC file. So that's your second EPC. Moving on to your third project, this will most likely be the one that you do yourselves from home. So this is most likely going to be your own home. Now, all of the same evidence is required as mentioned before. So the written site notes, you'll need to produce those from scratch. The photographs, of course, you'll be taking yourselves. So you'll be perhaps using your smartphone or digital camera to take lots of photographs. You'll need to produce your own floor plans from scratch. Once you've input all of this into the software, you'll need to download the Assessor Hub Site Note Report. And finally, once you've produced your EPC results, you'll need to take a screenshot of that draft EPC summary. But you'll notice there is an additional requirement on this particular EPC, something called the storyboard. So you only need to do this for one of your EPCs, EPC 3. The storyboard is a Word document that you'll find templated within your learning pack, and you are required to write a statement in your own words, telling a story, if you will, explaining what you did from start to finish during your assessment. So this is a thorough, exhaustive explanation, a story. Imagine you're writing a story here, explaining what you did from A to Z. When you arrived at the property, you walked around the building, carried out your survey, and then left. So to help you along with this, we've included all the criteria in red that needs to be covered during this written explanation. So that needs to be in your own words, and I suggest you're going to end up with perhaps a page or two of text explaining all of that process. So that's required just for your third EPC. The fourth EPC is just repetition of what we've already discussed. You need to supply all of the relevant evidence for that fourth building. Now that might be one that you do yourself, or perhaps you decide to use one of the virtual surveys supplied. One way or the other, we need to see EPC 4 and all of its associated supporting documents. EPC 5 is exactly the same. So again, you might decide to do your own building, or perhaps use one of the virtual tours. Either way, make sure you supply all of the relevant evidence, make sure it's clearly labelled, and make sure it's neatly packaged up in the correct folder. So that brings you to the end of the 5 EPCs and their requirements. So the next obvious question is, how do you go about submitting your portfolio when you're ready? Well, we use a system which is supplied by a company called Skillshare, and they've designed an e-portfolio platform which, as a training provider, we have invested in. So what you need to do is make sure, once you have completed all of the general documents and at least your first EPC, so when you get to that stage, then you can request access to your e-portfolio. To do that, please email our helpline. So when you are ready, please email helpline@energy-trust.co.uk with a request to access your ePortfolio account. You'll receive an email back the same day with further instructions and your login details. So that information will be given to you upon request. Once you have submitted your portfolio, it will take your assessor approximately 5 to 7 working days to assess all of your work, to provide you with feedback, and in some cases there might be some changes, some amendments, and then ultimately your portfolio gets signed off. And once your portfolio is all signed off, we can then send you your City and Guild certificate once the assessment process is complete. So that's just a summary of the portfolio guidance and everything you need to do to complete that portfolio. So that brings us towards the end of our discussion today. So if you've got any questions, any queries, if you require any technical support, please feel free to email our helpline. It's helpline@energy-trust.co.uk, and we'll be happy to get back to you and support you through your qualification. Thank you.